Ready?
Yep.
Okay, we will call to order the Village of Lake Bluff Sustainability and Committee Enhancement Committee, Ad hoc Committee for Wednesday, August 29th, 2018. Can I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Member Twitchell?
Here.
Twitchell?
Whittle.
Twitchell, okay. Member Patterson?
Here.
Member Johnson?
Here.
Member Bishop?
Here.
Member Sorensen is absent. Co-Chair Purrier?
Here.
Co-Chair Renner?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Okay. First up on the agenda, or do we need a motion? We're okay. First up on the agenda is consideration of the May 30th, 2018 meeting minutes. Do we have any comments, additions, corrections?
Do note I got 2 sets of corrections, so we'd ask that you approve these as corrected.
Okay. Can we take them as a bulk, or we have to do them individually?
You can just take it all together.
Okay. And we also have consideration for the June 27th, 2018 meeting minutes. Any corrections or additions to that meeting?
I think those were made too.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Sorry.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next up, we allow 15 minutes for anyone in the audience wanting to speak on an item not on the agenda for tonight. Is there anyone here who wants to speak on an item that's not listed here? If not, then we'll move to the order of the meetings.
Certainly. So I think to open up, we have representatives from the Garden Club here to present their plan.
Do we have those people?
Do we have someone here?
Have a presenter.
Hi, I have a PowerPoint, which I think they loaded in for me.
Yep. Pop that open. You should be ready to go.
Okay. I am Deirdre Toner, landscape designer, and working with the Lake Bluff Garden Club to help them in their renovation of the Washington Park. And I'm going to do a brief presentation on the timeline of where the park has been and how we'd like to see it become more of a community park and a more sustainable native plant park with color. And we'll go from there. Okay, let me just see. This is an overview of the park from early March. Let's see if I can get this to. Well, any way we can frame this out so that it. Let me see if I.
Try this out real quick.
Is it the PDF or is it the
It's
PPT?
We got a PDF over here. Technical support in real time, everybody. Most thrilling thing.
Yeah, we can just make it smaller or something, huh?
Maybe. And we don't have Acrobat on here, which would be a good reason.
Do we have power?
slide in the email. Well, it's not going to change anything.
Otherwise, we can just make it smaller, right?
Here, there is a. Yeah, I think that'll have to be how we work with it. Sorry about that.
Okay. Here we go. The Lake Bluff Garden Club, their mission statement has been a commitment to the environment and the community since their founding in 1917. And as we know, it's been 100 years as of last year, so we're so excited that Washington Park is falling into our next project. In 1995, Washington Park was just a littered green space, and at that time, the village planners made a notation in the plan as a place for gardens. And right away in 1996, the Garden Club designed and started to install a new garden space for the public. And it's grown and been maintained by them ever since. In 2017, the Civic Committee for the garden club decided to start a renovation project, and they contacted myself and John Polensky from Canukin to assist them in developing a plan that would encompass their goals. And the number one thing was that their design and the plant list be more welcoming to the community, more open, and that it retained the monuments that are already existing and become a more low-maintenance plant palette with color and some interesting areas that people could come and commune. So we're looking at possibly starting the garden renovations in the fall of 2018 and into spring of 2019, depending on what our next steps are. Here's just a brief overview. We have about a 4-foot grade change from the highest point up there in the northwest that falls down to the southeast. And it's a nice grade change. It's gives us a nice lower area there for sunny wet plants that do well, and an upper area that is higher for the higher and dry plants. It's really great. I have indicated where the new Lake Bluff sign has been placed, and that's an area that we would probably want to modify to encompass the sustainability plant list for what you want to use around the signs, so it's consistent around the city, the village. Basically, they wanted to improve the curb appeal for the residents in a daily drive-by. They wanted to create several garden areas where residents could have gatherings, read a book, commune with coffee. They had a very unique idea to design a photo booth with a 3-season landscape background. So people that could come and sit down and snap a picture with a grandchild, or a graduation shot could get taken in there. So I worked that into the plan, and we'll take a look at that. Existing in-ground monuments to remain. There was a beautiful oak tree that was felled that had to be taken down, and they have preserved the wood. It's been milled and is now being seasoned and will be made into a table. And that table will have, I think, a natural edge to it, and there's a place that we can feature that table with some benches that's going to be really welcoming. We're going to use the existing plant material and consolidate that where possible. And as I mentioned, the new plant palette will be predominantly native plants or cultivars of natives. And we're going to focus on low maintenance so that there's maybe one cutback a year. In spring or fall, you can go in there with a mower, boom, it's done. And you can rake it up, or you can let the seeds scatter, and that will reseed. And then if we have some issues with our lovely Joe Pye weed that we love that tends to scatter a little bit in the garden, you can always pull those in the spring. But anyways, the other thing is we really wanted to make sure there was 4-season interest in color, texture, and structure. Whoops.
If you use the arrows there, it should help you fine tune it a little bit. Sorry about that. I'm on the laptop itself. Just down a little bit.
Oh, there we go. So this is the overall, and this is the pointer. I'm not sure. But if we go up to the top, on the right, there's 3 trees, which is an existing, in the center on the right, there's 3 trees. It's an existing crabapple grove. And they're very nice. They're in good shape. They look great in the spring. And I thought, let's expand on that grove and make this very comfortable place that gives us an anchor against that big brick wall. And in there, we could put that photo booth in there and a big terrace that has the table on there as well. We wanted to open up the bed lines a little bit so people could really roam around the beds instead of, right now, there's a little bit of a stopping and a starting to things. On the west side that borders Sheridan Road, we've got a high line of hydrangeas that drops down to some lower perennials, and so that really gives sort of a welcoming, but yet a foil, a shield from all that traffic and the trains. In the lower portion, down here in the bottom center, we have installed, or we're proposing a fountain, a dog fountain, dog-friendly fountain on the terrace that's existing there. The plumbing's already there, and so we're proposing that. And then there's another seating area up over on the top left where there's a natural bench up there that we've just changed the angle to. And then we wanted to screen off the apartment buildings over on the east side and then get a little bit more screening across the brick buildings there that border the north side. So we've got some nice big native viburnums to go in there, and also accenting with a couple of tall grasses. This is sort of a schematic of where those trees would go for the new crabapple grove. And then in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the table laid out, and then behind there are some boulders that would be seating boulders for the photo booth. We have existing, I'm pretty sure there's zoomy crabs, and we could use the same zoomy crab or prairie fire crab, that's to be determined, but I think it would really give a nice anchor to the park. This is a schematic for the sidewalk on the south side that shows where we're proposing right in the center there, the drinking fountain. Some of the plant material that would go around there, some of the salvias, and they've got some beautiful red hydrangeas that we want to reuse, and then put some native creeping plants in between the existing flagstones to give some nice interest there and prevent the weeds from growing in. Then we sort of come into just a general overview of some of the plant material. Bottlebrush buckeye in the lower left, some foam flower. These are, oops, I'm not going to focus too much on the plant material. Let's see, up, here we go. But witch hazels, 9 barks, that one in the center there that's got that burgundy foliage, that likes it hot and sunny, so that could do, and wet, so that could do really well in that nice lower wet corner. Buttonbush is another native that gives us, the one on the right, that gives us a spring flower, and then a pretty Sputnik-like fall arrangement. Some viburnums. On the lower left is a wonderful native called Indian pinks, or Bowman's root, and that does really well in our climate. We've actually used it in the Belvedere garden over at Lake Forest on the Bluff, and it's doing really, really well. And of course, sumac. You know, we love our sumac because of the fall color. Some hydrangeas for some really nice accent. The oak leaf hydrangeas would be really great up in the on the plan there on the upper right-hand corner, a grouping of those. And then the hummingbird summer sweet is a great part shade plant that we can use as an accent. Some of our native butterfly weed, the swamp milkweed, which we'd use, and some of the grasses that would be in there to accent and kind of create rivers around the perennial plant material that will showcase the color. Some of the coneflowers, the pale purple, and then the traditional native purple coneflower, and maybe even popping in some of the cultivars that have even more color. Here's some of the native ground covers that we would like to use back in that area behind the new photo booth and the terrace. A combination of wild geranium, prairie alum root or foam flower, some Labrador violet, and some zigzag solidago. Works really well in a shady, moist, organic ground cover. And a couple of other options for native plants. The mountain mint, which seen here on the right is at Millennium Park. I was driving today down Sheridan Road, and they had in the Kenilworth planters on Sheridan Road, it was filled with mountain mint, and you could see the butterflies just all over it. I'm like, it's mountain mint. It's kind of neat. And then St. John's wort in the upper left-hand corner, and Indian physic, which is another popular native plant that is very nice in the garden in the spring. So there's our overview. And so we're looking for just a presentation here, and many of the plants have been put together on our list that I've used for many years that comes from the Lake Forest Park Management book that was put together by Cliff Miller and Dr. Wayne Cernum many years ago. And they have a lovely list of bluff, ravine, tableland plants, shrubs, canopy plants, forbs. So it's a good reference, so we've used that in here as well. So our next step is really sort of what's our next action steps in sort of moving the project forward. And so if there's any questions?
Is there any comments from the members?
Deirdre, I have a couple of questions. One is or maybe this is a Glenn question. The grass being mowed, not the native, but the green grass that's growing in there would be mown.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be fertilized?
So-
And would it be something that we actually would not want fertilized, especially when you have dog bowls with water and so on and so forth? That was what went through, and it might be a nice place to have a little pilot of non-fertilized.
Sure. So as a general rule, Lake Bluff Public Works does not maintain this park. The Garden Club's pretty much responsible for maintenance of it.
Even
So
the mowing?
I believe so.
My understanding from Jake is that it's been mowed by Lake Bluff for the last 15 years.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Never
that
mind.
maintenance is done by the Garden Club.
There you go. So
Perfect. And what is our policy on fertilizer? We don't
I'm
know,
not aware
but
of
what
that, but I
could
can
we
look
find
into that
out?
for you.
Yeah, because it would be a nice place, I think, to pilot, know,
A natural lawn,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't believe it's ever been fertilized. And the village mows it, but they don't fertilize.
Okay. Do we have one?
Real quick, if you have any comments, if you can use the microphone.
Right, we did put this.
It should
Yeah,
go
there
through.
is an irrigation system
Thank you.
that's active now, and that will actually be retrofitted to the new beds, and that may be one of the reasons why the grass just gets mowed and it looks good, because it is getting some water, I would imagine. But a lot of these plants, most of these plants, once they get established, after the first year and a half, turn that irrigation system off. They're gonna be fine on their own, except in really droughty weeks of July when we haven't had any rain, and you might have to turn the system on for a week or two, July into August.
It's quite a gift from the Garden Club to Lake Bluff. Quite a gift.
I think that the Garden Club does such a fantastic job all through the village, in downtown, the planters, by the train station, and then this park is really part of our entryway. So when you were talking about the plantings that are along Sheridan Road, which is the west side of the park, will they be low enough that when you're driving, you can actually see the beauty of the park?
Well, there's kind of a dual-edged sword there, because we want to, in some ways, create a little bit of a privacy screen from the cars going by and the trains and that parking lot, but yet we do want people to drive by and be able to look into the garden. So the time of year when those panicle hydrangeas are going to be at their highest and most showy is going to be August, September, October. But otherwise, they're going to be creeping up, and there's plant material in the front of the fence and in the front of the garden that starts out low, and then there's a middle layer, and then in the top we have the hydrangeas. And we can always change that. If we want to keep it at 4 feet, we can. If we want to go to 6 with the hydrangeas, we can.
I happen to live in that area, and all year. It's just a joy to walk by, especially in the spring with the real early yellow, and I would hate to lose that from Sheridan Road. The other thing is you mentioned that you're thinking of making this more of a community effort. And I'm noticing that it's such a big job to weed all of those beds. I mean, I garden and I know what it's like. You put in hours and hours and hours. Are you hoping to create something where around that block people are involved in the weeding and
Well,
help you some?
I think what I had meant was that we wanted to make it more welcoming to the community as a whole, so people could really consider, let's walk up to Washington Park and have a sit down, or let's, go over with a bottle of wine and meet the Smiths there.
Right.
Bring the dogs, that kind of thing. I think that the Garden Club has an active maintenance program within their club that they use on that, and I'm not sure where that's going to go, or if they're going to open that up to more members wanting to join the committee. Who knows? That could be a good community outreach.
It's so much work, and it gets out of hand, to be honest. Right now, their weeds are pretty high. And if you had a community, or even the block, who got really excited, they would probably be happy if they were trained by the Garden Club to know what to do.
You know what, that makes me think
We
of
use
something else.
we use the microphone for the people on TV.
Oh, I see.
Thank you.
State your name.
My name is Marietta Hans, and I live in Lake Bluff. And what you just said, Leslie, makes me think that I know the big picture for the Sustainability Committee is to look for a signature landscape garden, look for the whole village. And maybe that idea can be developed as part of the whole package, is that this area needs volunteer gardeners. This spot needs volunteer gardeners. So it can be part of your package that we're putting this in, and we'd love to get people excited about, adopting maybe this garden or this spot as a place that you take care of. Maybe it's a school, maybe it's the neighbors, but I don't know, you just sparked that idea.
I mean, I think being part of that community right now, I would just love to feel like I had the right to go in and pull a few weeds. Because it's something that you love to do if you're a gardener, if you know what I mean. The other thing was that I was mourning the loss of that tree, and it's so exciting to hear that you're actually using this wood, and the community should know what you've done. And I think people will use it and come, but what are you planning to do as far as the recycling bins and the trash containers? Right now, there's just one sitting there sort of on top of where the old tree was. So what in the plan, how will that be incorporated?
I think that's still to be developed, because we have to make sure that the overall plan is approved, and what we're doing with we're placing the new table on that new terrace. So where those hardscapes are will definitely dictate where we want to have trash receptacles. And maybe they won't be the big square ones anymore. Maybe there'll be a little bit more of a lower profile trash receptacle.
And getting a recycling along
Right.
with that would
Exactly.
be exciting for that little park.
Yeah,
Because people are going to use it if it's there.
yeah.
It's pretty exciting. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to offer, one, it's a really exciting plan and wonderful to see a park being revitalized. I think, did you say something about there would be a sign where people could see the species list, or were you saying something?
That,
about
I think, we've talked about that, and I think that that's a really good thing to do. Because that way, people can come into the garden in the community, and they can say, wow, that's Indian pinks. That's what they used to pick, the Indians picked this, and they used this for, in the olden days, for putting on wounds or something like that, little antidotes, and we can feature different things, but definitely have some of the major plants and some of the perennials all labeled up. So if they want to go and do a little garden in their own and say, oh, I like that coneflower, and I like that mountain mint, and let's do that, so they don't have to.
So you do think there will be some kind of
Yeah.
interpretation?
I think
'Cause
there's gonna be an educational aspect to the garden.
I think it's a really great
Yeah.
opportunity and a resource.
Oh, there are signs that are planned that are.
And you know what, the other thing I want to say is the table is going to be a showpiece for that. And the garden club worked hard to try to come up with dimensions. So the table's going to be 12 feet long, about 3.5 feet wide. And when you saw the pictures, there are benches so that, speaking of education, you know, this is a place where a classroom can come and learn about sustainable plants and native plants and maybe have a field trip down there. And so, and the table would be big enough for more than one group to sit. So that's the other educational piece, is that showpiece is going to be there. And that idea of using native wood from Lake Bluff, again, in your community-wide plan could be another key element that is consistent with all these little areas you want to coordinate.
Well, because what I was going to say is I think it's a really neat opportunity where the garden club can really showcase how folks can landscape in their own yards, to use it as a demonstration for that, especially with the natives, the concern about pollinators today. You have a lot of pollinator-friendly plants there that would be a great program with children, or just to help people understand how that can fit in their own garden. As well as you said, there's a wet area. I mean, we experienced terrible flooding last year. People can really do a lot to mitigate that based on native plants that are, you know, water friendly. So anyway, it's an opportunity to really educate our community about what can be done. So I don't, a lot of that could be on a website, because
Yeah, I
you
was just
can't
gonna
put all
say,
that.
we can integrate this into the website, so that when they wanna look up a plant, they can get the story, they can get the pictures, they can have it seen what it looks like in a garden in the spring, summer, and fall, and really develop that interest, so.
And also that notebook that you highlighted, that Cliff was responsible, that might be something we incorporated into a link on our
Oh, right.
native
Is that
plant.
available to the
Right.
public?
Is it available for the public?
That would be nice.
I'm sure it could be.
I
Cliff
think
was
it
here last,
I think it was I think it's on file somewhere in Lake Forest,
yeah.
but, because that's where I got it from.
What's the name of what's the name of the book?
It's the Forest Park, Lake Forest, Illinois Natural Areas Management Plan. And it was, I think, a 4-year study that they did of the bluff, the ravine, the tablelands, and they analyzed all the plant material, and then they went back 100 years, 150 years as to what should be there, what was there. And that's why I think there was, at one point, there was some arborvitae put into Forest Park, and people were like, well, what do you mean arborvitae? They weren't there, but they were eastern cedars, and they were back then. And so it was a good plant, and, you know, so those are the reasons why. And that's something that definitely could be an educational aspect into the website for Lake Bluff.
Yeah.
I guess my one question is, it's really a beautiful plan and very ambitious, and so I know Canucken said that they would do the maintenance for a year, was my understanding, and then after that, is the garden club gonna, I mean, I kind of like to do a 5-year plan, so at least you know that the maintenance and things will be taken care of, you know, because it's really a beautiful plan that's out there, and you want to just make sure to preserve it.
Well, usually when I design a garden for, whether it's a private individual or a public place like this, I like to put together a 4 to 5 year plan that incorporates sometimes the city and the city hours that they're going to be contributing. So we talk with exactly if there's any budget for maintenance from the city, the other groups that are going to be involved, and what specifically needs to be done. And it also would entail having, you know, an expert that does like myself or Cliff or someone that comes in twice a year, does a walkabout with the garden club and said, this looks really great, this is struggling, maybe we should move this here, and does a recommended summary. so that that maintenance plan then becomes a real document for moving forward after that 5 years, when it's really, doesn't take a lot of work.
So that's kind of all in the
Right.
planning
Mhm.
process.
Yeah, that would be part of it.
One other question or encouragement would be in the sort of modest hardscape areas that you had, if those could be with recycled materials, or again, a demonstration for people, or if they're permeable, or, you know, whatever.
Right.
There are some interesting things to show the community what they could do in their yards as well. That would be great.
Be awesome.
Right now, we have irregular flagstone, which is like a native stone in most of the areas there. So we just elaborated on that into the new areas. But we could consider doing something else into pavers, but that's definitely a
Well,
consideration.
only if it fits the
Yeah.
flavor.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a few comments, maybe nice to haves and probably what I would consider more must haves. I had a chance to review this with a landscape architect in my firm. One of the things that was brought up was the visibility from Sheridan, which I understand there's both a desire to have that view, but also to provide a barrier to the cars. And one of the things I thought was a great idea was maybe if there was a small entrance into the garden from Sheridan, so you could attract people from across the street or walking down the street to simply turn and enter into it. Just a suggestion. I love the seating. First of all, I love the whole plan. This is amazing. You've done a really great job. I was wondering if there's an opportunity for more seating, and that may be something that could evolve over the course of it, because I could see a lot of activation from the public to this site, and a lot of people going, like as you said, for wine or to meet their friends or to have gatherings. So maybe more seating, maybe smaller tables. One of the plants were great, but one of them, I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing it right. She questioned was, is it Polinium? P-O-L-E?
Polemonium.
Saying that it wasn't the hardiest plant, she thought.
Polemonium is Jacob's ladder, and
Okay.
it's a really nice native plant
Yeah.
that is very long-lasting in the right conditions, where it's part shady and sort of moist and organic. And we've got those back in that area underneath the crabapple, so I think they'll be pretty good.
Okay, it was
But-
just, again, a
yeah,
nice,
right.
just as a comment.
Yeah.
About again, bringing people to it, we're having a discussion later in this meeting about bikes and supporting more access to bikes. I could see people, myself included, wanting to get on the bike, bottle of wine in the back carrier, and get there. So we might want to
That's
talk.
transporting.
Yes,
Yep.
it's closed.
And driving underneath.
Okay. I go to Target, I load up. But we might want to look at an area that might support, we're going away from the long, ugly racks to maybe something that's more decorative.
Right?
There might be an opportunity here to set up an area for bikes. And the last thing was more of a code issue, which I didn't even think about. As we look at the seating, there was a lot of comments from the landscape architect about accessibility. If you've got seating on the site, people cannot go across in lawn chairs or in walkers, and you might want to consider either the flagstone or extending some sort of small path so people with disabilities can enjoy the garden.
Right, that's a good point. And the eastern side of the garden was something that we talked about developing, like in a second phase with more seating over there, where it's sort of a shadier area over there with some more scattered seating, or even some casual, casual groupings of seating, like you were suggesting, some additional seating in there. We'll have to look at the ADA issue in terms of the garden being completely ADA accessible, because,
Yeah, the only thing she said is the whole garden doesn't have to be accessible, only to the seating.
right,
And she talked about the bench and having one of the bench, making sure they're not fixed, they're removable. So a wheelchair could fit in at that large table, a companion seat could be next to it. If there's other seating in there, that might also have to be connected, was her
Right.
interpretation of, she does a lot of parks around Chicago, of the ADA requirements, not the whole tour of the garden.
right. But we definitely could consider putting in a pathway there.
But, and there again, instead of it being flagstone, maybe it could be
Pavers,
a material, a permeable
Sure.
material
right,
as a highlight.
yeah, definitely.
That's all I had.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Do we have what do we do now?
Okay,
Yeah, so I know,
so I think this sounds like the group is definitely in favor. There's some good suggestions, and this then would go up as a report to either the village board or other committees.
certainly could, yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's still definitely a couple questions hanging out there. So the maintenance plan, I think, is a good idea that we wanted some more clarity on at the staff level as well. I think some of these ADA questions probably would need to be looked at before it went a whole lot further. So I don't know if you want to make a recommendation now or ask this group to come back when there's some more details around some of those things. I mean, certainly if the general election looks good, I think it's appropriate to say that, but probably isn't. Probably need to see a couple more of these details before we can
Do a
give it the
formal
final
recommend-
thumbs up, yeah.
That sounds fine.
So, I have a question just about procedure. Knowing that they would want to get going on this fall, at least some of it, if we're not meeting until October 3rd, and you could get the couple of little issues figured out between now and the 3rd, then it goes to the village board, which is, right? Does it have to go to the board, or is it here? Does it stop here? I'm sensitive to planting timing.
Well, officially, will a permit have to be issued? I assume with the fountain there would be,
I believe so, yes.
so, I don't know if it has to officially go to the village board or whether it just goes through the normal permitting process. I don't know.
I'd definitely have to look in, if the group is comfortable with this moving forward without seeing it again, we can.
I mean, I'm comfortable with going forward. I would just like to see some of these issues addressed, you know.
I would agree with that.
I would too.
We made notes and we can make some revisions of the plan and the garden club to fine tune those areas.
Do you know what if you want to come up to the microphone again, do you know what your planting schedule or what the time frame needs to be for this?
Help you out here. So I'm John Polensky with Canukin. As far as the table goes, the table's not gonna be ready to be actually installed probably until Memorial Day of next year, so we won't actually have an ADA issue until the springtime. We'll have the next couple months or the next 2 months to work on trying to come up with what all of our solutions are to any particular possible ADA solutions. Also, the paving is permeable. The flagstone paving is permeable. All the joints are planted, so there's not going to be any issues with we'll have a good permeable paving solution there already. One ADA compliant solution that I've seen done in the past that I've installed a couple times is actually a recycled granite product called Kafka from up north. It has a plasticizer in it that stabilizes it, and it's 100% ADA compliant. It will go with our flagstone. I've got a bunch of great ideas on how to address some of these issues that have come up. So if we could at least get a green light that the planting looks good, knowing that we're gonna come back on October 3rd, I believe you said it was?
Yeah.
With our solutions for the ADA issues and also the maintenance plan, that would be helpful because my timeline for planting is really after the beginning of October, I try to not put very many perennials at all into the ground. We would be limited just to putting in structure plants, and the whole place would kind of look a little bit unkept for the winter and the fall.
We could do a phase 1 and phase 2, right?
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Because the
Definitely.
plantings to me are,
Go for the plantings.
yeah, then the whole seating, accessibility, bikes and that kind of stuff can be a phase 2 plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
It might
So
even be
so-
fall
All
of
the
2019
plantings you
as well.
were thinking to do in the fall.
I was hoping to do all the plantings and probably all of the hardscape. Just the only thing that will not be ready to go until spring is the table itself.
And, yeah, the table and any additional seating, you have to think about that too. Because I wouldn't mind seeing additional seating. I think this park's gonna draw a lot. I mean, you've done such a great job, it's gonna attract, I think, a lot of interest and a lot of people wanting to go there as a destination.
Yeah, we're a little bit limited with the size of the oak tree that came down, and we're trying to not bring in any other, wood that came from somewhere else besides the park. So we're a little bit stretched with the material that we have to work with. But we can certainly look at breaking it out potentially and moving some seating to other areas, so there's more more groups.
But it
Deirdre.
wouldn't need to be table seating
Could be
necessarily.
Adirondack chairs, it
Yeah.
could be,
We had like open back benches was what we were thinking.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could be moved around and even taken off into the grass if a group wanted to come and have,
Right.
sit off to the side.
But I think that whole seating thing, I agree, I'd like to see more, but that has to be all tied into the accessibility.
Has anyone talked to the village about benches that move around? I know, I don't.
I know where you're going,
I'm not trying
Leslie.
to be negative, but I've worked with arborists on the beachfront, on the garden there, and they were talking to me about how difficult it is now with the benches, as far as keeping them and not having them
All theft or?
moved.
Disappear.
Moved. I think if you're gonna have something that's portable, it's not a good idea.
We're gonna have to work that through.
Yeah, the conversation that I had with Drew was hoping to see the benches permanently affixed to the ground, which presents, an ADA problem with the wheelchair access, but that's something that
But
we
if
can
you,
work through.
if you had a stone that the caregiver could sit next to, or the,
Right, but what you're saying on the, if, like, say, the big table,
yeah,
if those seating, those multiple seats are fixed, one of them will have to be removed permanently, because you have to create a spot for a wheelchair.
Like on the end.
The head of the table, and then
Yeah.
a placard goes
Right.
usually on the surface of the table.
So,
And so one thing I was wondering too, if maybe the committee could find out, I like the idea of creating a gate or an opening in that Sheridan Road entrance. And if that's gonna be possible, if we could, if that's allowable for us to do that. And then also the, how this moves forward if we have to get village approval on it as well, or like you say, if it stops here. Because that will just kind of affect our
well,
timeline.
I think, and again, I think anything that involves plumbing, water, seating, would have to go through a permitting process. I don't think, I'm pretty sure that plantings don't, or, cutting an opening in a railing and creating an opening on Sheridan, I don't think some of that stuff requires permitting.
so suffice it to say, we could vote on approving the plant materials and the general location of the borders, north, west, and east borders, and leave room for the south border to be jiggered a bit for the ADA and, and other seating,
And the water feature too, would have.
and the water feature, yeah.
And I would totally agree with Ann that the maintenance and ongoing maintenance is a huge issue. So I think that has to be addressed and some kind of a permanent plan put in for continual maintenance of this area.
Well, and one of the things that I've helped be involved in the past when we do face these maintenance issues is there is a way, I know, I designed the healing garden at Lake Forest Hospital many years ago, and we, in our fundraising, we created monies that could be donated for the annuity of the maintenance, so that the city keeps the money and it just keeps growing, and we can do different small fundraising things, a wine tasting or a craft beer, something or other, and then have those monies be contributed, this is going to help the maintenance for the parks.
But in that, as you know, at Forest Park, they've had to hire, it's not just the maintenance, it's
Right.
training the city employees to make sure that they're pruning correctly,
Right,
and that the weed whacker isn't seen as a
A clearing agent.
a clearing agent or a pruning agent.
Deadheading
which it
tool.
is- Well, I mean, it happens all the time on the sumac,
Yeah, it does.
yeah.
here by the post office. They weed whack it because they don't want to weed it. And they
Yeah.
just,
It certainly doesn't do much to put anything in writing on a 5-year plan, but one of the big things that hasn't been talked about is we're really hoping that the revitalization and the refurbishing of this garden kind of brings in new members to the garden club, so that the garden
Sure.
club can handle the majority of this internally. The hope would be that the garden club can continue after this first year, where we're training the garden club on how to prune everything and what to deadhead and what to split and transplant and fill in. After that first year, the hope would be that the garden club has new members because everyone's so excited about this. But like I said, obviously that doesn't fill a box on a budget for
Right,
the
but I
committee.
think like you said, Leslie, with the, like Lake Forest Open Lands has the open, or the Buckthorn Days. Or Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, Labola has, the Buckthorn Days where they welcome volunteers. You can have the same thing, deadheading, a deadheading day, first Monday of
Pulling the weeds.
A lot of Lake Forest High School students, for their environmental science class, have to volunteer those Buckthorn Days. So a lot of students are actually kind of accustomed and familiar with weeding, so perhaps reaching out to the environmental science classes, not only to use that as a space for class time and field trip, but also including that in the curriculum, because we are mandated to go and
Great.
attend those weeding days anyways.
You
Right,
just got 100
Did you
kids.
private yards too?
right. Can appeal to the scientific, the botany and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
physics
Yeah.
and
wonderful.
future landscape architects. then.
So adding that as a list of locations once it gets started means that you'd probably have 25 kids any given weekend who would be available.
Just a random thought occurred to me too. At some point in the future, we might want to look at low-impact solar lighting out there. Solar lighting,
Solar
Solar
lighting.
lighting,
maybe around the tables or seating when we get to that
Right.
area, because people could stop by there in the evening as well.
Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
need to be able to take your wine out of there.
Yeah, I think that the maintenance issue is really just, it's a huge issue, because we've had that before in the garden club, you know, the softscapes versus the hardscapes. The softscapes are harder to, you know, so
Right.
I think that's just something that's gonna come up, so if you guys just have a firm, you know, plan of what that is, I think it'll help going forward, because I know that'll come up.
right, yeah,
Okay,
great.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have the okay then to go?
That's the question.
For the plan.
So, my question is, after all of this discussion, we talked about phase 1 and phase 2. Is it appropriate at this time to say yes to phase 1, which is go ahead and start planning the plants according to the plan?
Yes, can I get, would someone like to make a
I'll make
motion?
that
The
motion.
phase one planting?
Yes.
Second?
Subject to.
Subject to.
Seeing a maintenance plan that doesn't need to come back before us, that this village needs to approve.
Okay, so who,
Because we don't have the authority to say yes, right? We're just recommending it.
We'll
then to the
recommend,
village,
yeah, I mean,
so
yeah.
they'd still have to get that approval
It's,
from,
they don't,
just so they know what they, you know, if we say yes tonight, is that a done deal, or they then have to?
I think
It
this
has
is
to
an
go some-
administrative issue. We make the
Okay.
formal, we're not a legally binding.
Right.
We'll vote to approve it or recommend it, and then in the village administration, I think it becomes a village administration issue. Phase two, I think, would become an additional permitting issue, which would require a whole nother process.
not in front of us necessarily.
I would think we would like to see that
Yeah.
final hardscape and any recycling that goes with the hardscape and seeding, and so.
So then, should they then reach out to the administration, or the administration would reach out to them?
Yeah, certainly, I think we can, I know we have a meeting tomorrow morning to talk about a few issues. I'm sure we can, at least figure out the path forward then and try to be back in touch by the end of the week as far as where else we need to
does
go.
that sound, is that good?
Okay, so we had a
Oh,
motion.
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, roll call.
Hang on one sec.
A lot of notes.
Yeah, many notes, many notes. Member Patterson,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
yes.
Member Bishop,
Aye.
Member Twitchell,
Yes.
Co-Chair Purrier,
Yes.
Co-Chair Renner.
Yes?
Oh, Ms. Johnson, I forgot about you, didn't I?
No, she, you
No.
didn't.
I got it
She's
right.
a
Okay.
yes.
Everybody.
I was
She's a
one
yes.
short. I was one short because of
Everybody was a yes.
She was-
Sorensen.
You're good, you're good.
6. Can't count to 6 today. Motion carries.
Okay. Recommended the village administration to move forward and talk to you by the end of the week.
Awesome, great.
Thank you again.
Thank you for all your hard work. Okay. Next up is the sustainability
Yeah,
draft.
just to note before people filter out, if people filter out, our next meeting is set for, we'll talk about it here soon, but we're looking at October 3rd. So that would be the next meeting of the corridor beautification study group as well. The first meeting on it was a couple months back, and so that's the group with Cliff Miller, with IDOT, with Lake County DOT, and all these stakeholders talking about other corridors in the village as well. So just want to make sure that's out there and people are aware of it.
I'm not available on that week.
Okay.
And not available again at the end of November, or the last week of November. I'm out of town.
Okay.
Why were we moving off the 26th?
Couple reasons, a little bit more time and scheduling issues for our presenters. I know
Okay.
John and I are both out of town at a
it.
conference that week as well, and so just not
Okay.
right about then is close to right, not quite there.
Oh.
We can talk about that now before we keep moving on, if you like.
Or do we want to get to the end of and then talk about the next meetings?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, why don't you take us through this great draft?
I don't know if it's a great draft, but it's a draft. It's not, I was hoping to bring you a complete draft, but again, a couple personal
okay.
things in my life got in the way, but hopefully enough here for you to chew on. And again, apologies both for not quite being complete and also for the short notice on this.
You guys are excused.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Sorry. There's just no point in talking over them. It's okay.
So, and hopefully enough to chew on. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it in the past couple days, and of course, open. We'll keep developing this with the hope of getting it finished up soon. Please give us your comments, your thoughts. There's a couple places here where certainly we would like your input and your feedback.
Do you want to give, does anyone want to give a few quick comments?
Yeah.
If I could, before we get into that, just 1 minute to lay out sort of our thinking here. One is a big part of the SEC and a big part of our philosophy discussion so far has been really heavy on engagement and education, and so perhaps at risk of being a bit cute, but the thought is, can we do that in the plan as we're going? And so there's sort of each section, when it's done, we hope will have that introduction. What is this? Why does it matter? Some principles that also help to explain the issue as we go. I think that's mostly working pretty well. Our action steps, which this group talked about back in January, and then what can you do is really sort of the educational outreach piece, trying to get multiple objectives done.
That piece.
So
I like that organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did too.
That's great.
It's helpful.
with that, happy to, I
With
can go through, or we can just go straight into comments, your preference.
Has everyone had a chance to take a quick look through it? Okay, why don't we just go through? If anyone's got any comments, there's going to be more iterations of this, so.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Of course, I had to take a picture of each page instead of printing it out, Brian. Anyways, when we get to what can you do under, where it starts, old toilets to go, small fixtures add up, replace your lawn's irrigation with a water sense certified controller, add a rain barrel, that page, I think we should put down plant natively and add bioswales where optimal.
And this
And
is,
you have that in other parts,
yeah.
but somebody may not go into the other part.
That was one thing I struggled with, is you'll see there's a few places, rain barrels is the only one I duplicated, I think, but
Yeah.
there's, I wasn't expecting there to be quite as much crossover when I dug into it, especially in water, stormwater, and natural resources. That surprised me a bit, but we can pull that in. So we had swales, and what was the other one?
Bioswales and native planting,
Plantings.
and, maybe we can use the list, a link to the Cliff's list. Maybe he can adapt that for Lake Bluff.
Yeah, you might want to ask him if it needs to be updated either. It sounded like it was not that recent.
And then, when we were talking about eliminating buckthorn and other invasive species, I don't know where that shows up, practice better lawn care, fertilize carefully, encourage or enforce landscape companies not to dump down ravines. I'm still seeing it.
Okay. One sec.
Those were mine.
Okay, enforce landscape companies dumping down ravines, all right?
Mhm.
That would be an action step here?
That would be a what can you do?
Okay.
We have an ordinance saying no, but it still happens. I'm on enough properties, and you can just see, like this.
Okay.
So I'm really new to the committee as well as Sophia, and what will we do? You're talking about what will this committee do? Is that what we're saying?
It's sort of a village scope
It's
plan.
the village.
But certainly, I think
And
the
then what
emphasis is
will
on.
what will you do? I was assuming that was the village as well.
Those are the citizens.
Right.
So if you're
But how
reading
do we
this plan-
differentiate the we from the you?
It's totally arbitrary.
Who is the we? Is that us?
It's the royal we.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I took it as like the we was the village as a whole, and the you was as an individual, what you could do to help.
Okay.
Well, we could change it to what Lake Bluff will do, what citizens will do, I don't know.
And then individual households or individual responsibilities, or however we want to say it. I think that needs to be defined if we're going to publish the draft.
Okay.
And I would like to see, I know it's a small thing, but as we're doing all this, with biking and pedestrians, and I would like to see more with, dog waste and get
Oh,
some
yeah.
more of those containers around the village, because right now they're only down at the beach, and it would be nice to have one, up at the gazebo or other places as people are walking their dogs. and
Washington Park.
Washington Park. Because, we do have the dog on the logo, so I think we need to kind of address that.
Fair
Good
point.
point.
You mentioned the Conserve Lake County Award that is available, and I'm wondering if we would ever consider developing a Conserve Lake Bluff Award. That could be a beautiful plaque could be developed for people to have in their yards who have fulfilled what Lake Bluff feels is the correct way to.
Or businesses.
Businesses too, it would be perfect.
Yeah, it could be nice. We could have a little award ceremony every year for residences or businesses who
The way we
really.
do for homes and.
Mhm.
Mhm. I mean, do you just want things to be thrown out randomly?
Yeah, if you could just go down your list.
Okay. Under transportation, we don't say anything about encouraging the children to walk to school. That would be huge, because so many people drive their kids. And making sure, then to follow that up, to make sure that there are totally safe passages for bikes and pedestrians for all schools. But I think that would help a lot in Lake Bluff.
I know Central School has a very good setup with getting kids across there and, cars out.
Both schools do.
Yeah, I think secondary to that, obviously, would be mass transportation, using the bus. And last, do you want parents dropping off, right?
Right, that would be
And
the
I-
last thing.
I know that the school had struggled with what to do with the bus this year.
Alongside that, a big problem with the parents who drive their children to school is they idle in front of, this is a big problem at the high school specifically. There have been a lot of efforts, student effort, to have no idling signs put in front of the high school entrance, and I don't believe there's any in front of the elementary school or middle school entrance either. But that's something to consider as well.
And it's on our list in here.
You may note that, to Co-Chair Renner's point, once upon a time, there was a green check mark that said, free busing for students, and that's, unfortunately had to drop that since we wrote that.
Yes. I suggested a carbon tax option for the busing, but didn't go over well. In other words, you either walked or you took the bus or you paid a carbon tax. So you didn't pay to ride the
I
bus.
thought-
You paid not to ride the bus.
Saw that.
I like it.
There was a competing proposal that said that really the walkers should pay because they're the ones that need the crossing guards. So it's a very interesting committee, I understand. A crucible of ideas.
Would Lake Bluff, and I don't know if this is even feasible for collecting a tax, but we've spent a lot of time in Chicago recently and have noticed that since Chicago added the 7 cents a bag tax, everyone brings their own bags. Now, you wouldn't think 7 cents would make that much difference, but nobody wants to pay for a plastic bag, and everyone in the city is now carrying a couple of bags with them in their purse or just, and when they go into a store, all stores, nobody except a bakery can give you a bag for free.
Yeah, we did have some conversations on both that and recycling at the stores for bags that they do have. So I know that's still kind of on our agenda.
Could Lake Bluff even handle collecting a tax like that, say from
Say,
Target?
we're home rule, are we not?
I mean, legally you could do it. Certainly there are other communities that are smaller than Chicago that do it. I believe Evanston has a tax. I don't know if they just regulate the bags that are given out or if they actually charge the bag tax, but you could.
I know Target has it in their system, so they can easily, when you do a self-checkout, it charges you for the bag. So they have the ability to do it without any computer work,
And Heinen's has recycling.
and they do. They use a lot of paper there, so that's good.
Well,
Well, they always ask
paper's
you
not.
if plastic is okay, and it still drives me crazy. I mean, I know you don't have to take it, but they don't, most stores will say plastic or paper. They say, is plastic okay? They go right for that at Heinen's, and
Yeah.
it just, I don't know, it's just a little pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
And I know they have recycling, but you have to remember to, take them back, and, I don't know.
Did I see a general item on bags or reducing bags in here? I can't remember.
There's a bring your own bag
Bring your own,
campaign
yeah.
item.
I think maybe we could change it to, we will evaluate ways to reduce use of plastic, and then just, it's an item that's on our agenda.
So here's an even more stupid question. Do kids bring their lunch now, or does everybody buy their lunch?
So that's actually a question that the Lake Forest High School Environmental Commission is working on. A lot of students do buy their lunch, but the issue is it's all with plastic utensils and packaging. So there is a significant effort to use, to kind of have washable utensils, but at least at the high school, there isn't room to have an industrial dishwasher. So right now and for the foreseeable future, it's all plastic with those bought lunches, which a significant amount of students.
But they used to have a dishwasher.
Yeah, so they redid the
It's-
cafeteria,
Oh,
and it's.
and they eliminated it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that is, that's on the agenda for the environmental commission at the high school this year, though.
Okay.
Could probably buy a dishwasher with all the money you'd save by not buying a lot
Yeah.
of plastic.
We talked to the
Utensils.
facilities management, and they said the issue with not having, the issue with the dishwasher is that they would have to make an addition to the kitchen space because it takes up a lot of room, and I guess there's limited space in the back there. But the environmental club has offered to buy trays and utensils, but there just isn't the space, is the current discussion.
So everything you eat is in plastic?
Yes.
Wrapped in plastic?
It's either wrapped in plastic, foil, or in paper.
Maybe we should just eliminate hot lunch.
Well,
Amtrak's doing that. You can too.
I think the whole meal program is, I know in Lake Bluff, it's been discussed for a while. Right now, at the elementary school, they have kiddos, which is a food delivery process, and I'm not even aware of how they handle waste for that, because it's all delivered and then handed out to the students.
There is, at the high school level, a recently introduced composting program for kitchen scraps. And throughout the course of this year, there's going to be, again, significant effort, whether or not that occurs this year or next year, to have compost stations available in the lunchroom for students who bring their lunch or just any food scraps. But that's not yet instituted.
That's a good one. And at the elementary school, they used to have No Waste Wednesdays, but I haven't heard about that in a while.
Having graduated from elementary school.
Okay?
So I haven't had a chance to read it since I just got it yesterday, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have some comments. So should I send that to you, Glenn, and copy the committee?
No, you can't copy the committee.
Oh, okay, then I
Rule
won't.
3, remember? Rule 3.
No group emails.
Okay,
But you can just send it on directly to me. Of
Send it
course,
to
I know
you.
some other comments will come in. Please send them along as we come, and we'll keep working towards a fuller draft, and also to, give you guys some more lead time and talk about ways to do a little bit of public engagement around this too.
I had a few quick comments. I don't know if anyone else does too. I'll just go read them real quick. You did a great job in explaining how good we do handle waste. But I would like, just to toot our own horn in the document, add discussion about e-waste and special pickups. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that says, you can put a TV out at your curb. I can, or you can put special collections out, or you can do this, and you can do food scraps. People still don't know how great of a program and the options they have here. We didn't really mention about cooperation with other governing bodies, including the school district and the park district, but that's one of what we will do is to work with coordinate with those other groups. You talked about solar power, which we also have on the agenda. You have water conservation, but I kept thinking water conservation and quality, but then you talk about fertilizers.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and then also pesticides. I'm not sure, we could go in multiple places for pesticides. We talked about promoting and working with other groups. I don't know if we want to get specific, maybe not, with mentioning Lake Bluff Garden Club or Lobola, but we do talk about, working with community groups. Just those two groups, among others, do such a great job. I didn't know if we want to specifically mention them or not, but that's just a comment, not a major thing. We didn't mention under the local food production, our work that we've already done with bees and chickens, did we?
I think it is, I
Really?
tucked it in, but it's right there under number 10, continue pilot programs. So at one point.
You might want to just expand it then.
Yeah.
I think that's it, just to, again, not to toot our horn,
I
but
did not see that, yeah.
to mention that what we will do is we will continue to monitor and run pilot programs, including for chicken and bees, to to see,
And for context, at one point back in January when we brought this to you, local food systems was kind of a standalone section. Didn't really quite seem to work out that way. So we sort of folded it in. There's some chance to reevaluate that if you'd like, but kind of one of the interesting things we found was usually when people write about this, it's food within 50 miles, something like that. If you look at the people in our farmers market, most of them actually come from further out to
Yeah,
bring their
way
product to
further
market.
out.
Yeah, there's actually not a whole lot of Lake County farms that we could even, they sell to different clientele.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, there's quite a
There's-
few Lake
there's-
County
there's-
farmers.
yes.
Well, at least in terms of who we've reached, not saying that the Lake County has few farmers, actually had some
We've been
numbers pulled up on that,
making
but-
a concerted effort to grow farmers in Lake County, so there's more than you might imagine. But again,
Yeah.
More just in the context of sort of the farmer's market, I have my stall and my people, and I'm ready to go clientele is what
those are all my first draft comments. I might have more later.
Glenn, did you mention anything, I didn't catch anything about what you can do if you're going on vacation in your home, adjusting your thermostats, turning off your water heaters. And in the summer, you want to adjust your air conditioning up, and in the winter, you want to adjust your heat down so that, you're keeping your home moderately
You could even
Cool.
be turning off your
or moderately.
water service
Ye-
in the house.
Yes, you can. Mhm. But you should definitely turn down your water heater.
Well, and ComEd has that service now that you can opt in, where they have certain times where they want you to, commit to keeping everything down, and then they tell you how much you save. They'll send you a text and say, this day from 2 to 7. So I don't know if a lot of people know about that. I mean, I do it and get a lot of savings.
Sweet.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's a huge savings.
Yeah.
It really is. And I think that a lot of people would have, and me included, you have trouble when you have so many expenses in your life to say, okay, I think I'd like to change all my faucets and fixtures to save a few pennies. It's just really hard to get the plumber in to do all of this. Is there anything that we could do as a community to have an incentive to do that? That it would be financially, besides the savings over the years, is there any kind of a savings right now if you went in and put on all of your special faucets in?
That might be a Jawa question.
Yeah, look at it.
I mean, I don't know if there could be or would be, but there would be a tax savings, something that you would get. For a couple of years, if you bought a certain kind of an appliance, you could put it on your taxes and you got quite a nice credit for it. But is there anything for faucets or
Toilets.
toilets?
Yeah. Well, we'll take a look at that. I mean, there's usually when those kind of programs happen, they're local utility initiatives at this point. I mean, there used to be a little bit of money floating around
Yeah.
back with ARRA, and that's kind of gone, but certainly something we can look at getting in the business of. One of the interesting things, at least here, is if you look at, maybe we can put a little sharper point on it, but if you look at our housing stock, which is generally, a lot of it's up to date, but it's older.
Right.
I mean, these old
Yeah.
fixtures are out here. And you look at our water prices.
Yes,
I
they
mean, like
are.
it says, it's, whether or not we give you an incentive up front, I mean, that thing pays for itself 2 years. Toilets pay for themselves, could be as soon as that year, depending on
Yeah,
how
I
big your
think,
house is.
anytime you renovate and do new, you're gonna have to buy, you can't buy
Right,
the
if you're renovating and doing
Right.
new, but if you're not,
Right. There might be,
you encourage people
might be some things
to
like,
make the mess in their home to do this. It's so easy just
We
to
could
keep
have
doing what you're doing.
educationally,
Right.
We could show how fast a toilet, a new toilet pays for itself.
Right.
That's a math problem.
And if you knew,
Brian?
Well, we got it there for you. We did it for you.
Yeah,
yeah, 2 years.
but I bet it's shorter than that. That's a national average, right? Or is that the Lake Bluff average?
So some numbers are national, the Lake Bluff population numbers are local. So as far as how many people are in a typical house, things like that, that's local to us. And then the costs are all local.
Okay.
So it's just how often you use the bathroom, we don't survey for that kind of thing.
Oh, come on. Yet.
So when is the most water usage at one time? When is it?
Monday mornings.
No?
It's a trick question.
It's halftime of the Super Bowl.
Oh. But other than that day,
Other than that day, at that
it's
time.
Monday.
Okay. I give you that. But it really is halftime of the
toilet
Super
humor.
Bowl.
Yeah. Anything
Okay.
else?
any other comments? If you have more, this isn't the end of it, but,
Yeah, I just wanted
Looks
to
good.
put some red meat out there and take
Yep.
a look, and we'll keep building it.
okay. All right, next up, bicycles.
Sure, so again, as a,
Sorry.
primer slash,
Everybody's ears.
woke me up a little bit. As a primer slash, that's not what I wanted. Reminder, at least in the short term, while we're working on some of these bigger plans, things of that nature, we've had a couple shorter term priorities we've tried to dig into as a sustainability group that we've looked at, and one being bicycle parking, especially in the central business district, another being dark sky ordinances, light regulation, things like that that are relatively easy to wrap ourselves around. Fascinating statistics in the plan draft about dark sky, by the way. I learned all kinds of stuff in the process of writing that. But back on topic, bike racks. So we want to take some time, talk about different types, styles of bike racks. There are some parking guides we put in the book for you, or in the packet, that talk about, you know, sort of what are the appropriate types, what are the appropriate places to use them, things like that. And we'll start with a little bit of primer about that, and then we've ran out some numbers as staff as far as expected demand, how many we should shoot for, and trying to think about where we can put some of these too. But I think it makes sense to probably start with the aesthetics. Everyone likes to talk about, you know, aesthetically pleasing things. Very articulate tonight, I am, I tell you.
Well, I suppose first off, we should say that the ones we have around town, the schoolyard ones, are, no, get rid of them.
The worst
The
type
worst
human
type.
possible. You can see, and I'll pull up some photos that illustrate this, actually, if you want to take a visual tour of Lake Bluff. But you'll have to give me a minute. We've been taking some photos on and off the last few weeks in preparation for this, and I have some real gems from today on the Lake Bluff bicycle parking. Provided that technology is just not being very friendly with me today, I tell you.
Oh, you can't remember your password.
So, a lot of measurements, a lot of my hands and feet, don't worry about that. So this is really kind of the funny gem. So we have 5 bike racks in town, 5 spots where there are bike racks, I should say. So this is in front of the community church offices right here. So when you're looking at Bluffington's, it's over to your left and it's kind of around the corner. So as you can see, not really, we have one user here. He actually hasn't strapped it to the rack correctly. He strapped it on the end because these things are so well known for bending wheels. But if you walk a few feet closer to Bluffington's, we have 2 strapped to the light pole. We've got 2 strapped to the gardeners, 1 strapped to the sandwich sign. Again, sandwich sign. And then another empty bike rack a couple hundred feet down the street. So
In front of the bike shop.
in front of the bike shop. So as a little bit of a primer, you have 1 printed sheet in front of you. Our copier's broke, that's why it's not 2-sided. We apologize, but this, if you look at the second sheet, the second page, it gives you a walkthrough of all of our bicycle parking in downtown right now. So our typical rack looks just like this. It's about 10 feet long. Dimensions matter here, which we'll get into. And in theory, you can park 9 to 10 bikes on one side and 9 to 10 on the other. Obviously, there are some installations like this one where this doesn't work. Your one side is going off into the street. So altogether, you add this up, we have something in the neighborhood of 70 or 80 theoretical parking spots. Although again, this doesn't really work like this. If we go, again, empty racks, bikes parked nearby. If we go to the train station, we can see that, you know, these are just sort of jammed in here. You can see how tight those are. I mean, that rack's pretty much full. You can put an extra couple bikes on there comfortably, but that's with 5 on there. Again, we can style a rack.
And this is where I often park my bike, and I got my replacement bike, by the way.
Was your bicycle
Congratulations.
stolen?
Yeah.
We've lost 3. My husband won't ride his bike to the train anymore because we lost 3.
Yeah, so
I mean, can we put a camera there or something
Camera's
to
coming. We've
Is
got
it?
some security cameras going up in this fiscal year. I know we're getting close in a bit now.
So, yeah, I lost one, and then I studied the whole thing, well, about how bad these racks are, and what's a high-security lock that will not, that's difficult to break, so I went through that whole thing, but the thing about this, and just, you can kind of see it from this photo, is that in order to lock these properly with a U-lock around a tire and the frame, you have to put the bike over the rack, which scratches up the heck out of the tire and the frame trying to get that over. So that's part of the reason why these are not real good types of racks, just from a security standpoint, let alone a visual standpoint.
Yeah, and that's even, I mean, really, that's kind of come up as a hack after the fact.
Right.
I mean, the way these are designed to be used.
You can see on the
originally
right, someone's got a kryptonite lock, the yellow one, on the frame and the tire, which is one of the proper ways to do it.
The way these things were designed, you just wheel it up, you stick the wheel in there, it keeps it stood up. It's not made for security whatsoever, and this is it.
Plus, it looks terrible for our train station around town. It's rusting and.
Yeah, some of these are a little newer, I think you saw the one over here by Hansa Coffee, powder coat, that's a
Yeah.
little bit better, but not quite doing it. So, in the world of bike racks, there's three, and really most conventionally, two options that are preferred today. These are two of the good ones right here, and these are by far the two most common in urban environments. So there's the inverted U, also known as the staple rack, and there's the post and ring, oftentimes enjoyed because you can swap out a parking meter for it real easy. Big things you get is, one, it takes a U-lock really well around a really fat piece of metal that's hard to cut through. Two, it gives you 2 points of contact with the bike. And then third, ideally, even though these look a little minimalist compared to some crazier setups out there, they fit every type of bike, and it's really easy to get both wheels and the frame all hooked onto one piece of security.
So you'd have to have 10 inverted U's or 10 post and rings?
You can you have a inverted U, and you can put a bike on one side and a bike on the other without them interfering with each other.
Okay.
So you get two to a U. In theory, again, if you assume a schoolyard rack could park everything, which it can't,
Right.
it's 5 staples to a schoolyard.
And one of the things you'll see either throughout here or the other images we can share in another meeting as we go forward is that both the U and that circular can take all sorts of decorative treatments to them, including a boy and a dog running, or a business logo like these you see here. You can have those etched in and have, like in the circular one, or the U, you could have the village logo. So this helps our branding as well, and you could do colors in the green and the blue, which matches and enhances the village. So this is all part of a beautification in addition to supporting the town. And there's also the opportunity, I think, for public-private partnerships in some of the costs of these. I could see, Donati's having some, sponsoring some, or we could have village ones. We could have the library or the school districts, supporting some of these. I like the bike one, by the way, even though I know it's not the most practical. I like the look of it.
Actually, if you look at it, even though it seems a little silly, because everything is in line, it meets all the criteria you want.
Oh, okay.
It's a little silly.
You do
but-
it on both, lock both wheels, right?
Well, usually if you're trying to lock up both wheels, your bicyclist, they'll have a chain go around the back one,
Right.
and usually they'll quick release the back, they'll bring it up to the front,
Oh,
and they
okay.
put the U-lock through all three.
My brother had his seat stolen.
Yeah. You can do cables through the
Only
seat
so
as
much you
well.
can do.
There's seat bolts. You can also, because I studied this after my bike was stolen, I have the U-lock up front, but I also have an additional cable that goes through the back tire that goes to the U-lock. You can also get locks. You can take the bolt out of the tires and replace them with a bolt that cannot be opened unless the bike's upside down.
Which you can't do if
When it's locked.
Locked.
Taking this seriously now, Brian.
It's not stealing my bike.
You know what John's getting for Christmas?
I don't know, I've bought 2 already.
No, I meant the bolt.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the lock I bought from Germany was $150. So.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Heavy duty. So to put one last thought out there, and then we can keep discussing, we can move along. So on the front page, This looks like a whole lot of numbers. This was kind of thrown together quickly for public consumption, but there are, just as there are some standards out there for how many cars you need, how many parking spaces you need for a car in a given amount of space, there are some standards out there for how many bicycles you need, or how many bicycle parking spaces you need for a given amount of space. The caveat I always give here is that, these are very general and imprecise, and there's a lot of reasons you'd want to play with these numbers, but just to give you an order of magnitude, we're talking about 38 spaces at the Metro lot, which is probably what's actually there usable now. 8 in Block 1, which is there by, that for those of you who don't know our zoning terminology, Block 1 is Lake Bluff Brewery, it's Griffin Craft and Lackey, it's the bank.
Are these based on current best practices or some guideline that you got the numbers from?
Yeah, so those are, and again, big grains of salt with this, these are made from some guidance released by the Association of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher the acronym, the Association of Bicycle and Pedestrian Professions.
Okay, all right.
APBP is the acronym. We've got their book, it's great. They're one of the 2 guides that were in your packet, is the shorter version.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. Open conversation.
So this doesn't include the schools, or am I just missing that?
Yeah, we haven't reached out to the schools yet. We haven't gone even into public facilities a whole lot yet. This is just starting with a narrow focus on downtown, because that's where a lot of the congestion we've observed is, and also a lot of the theft issues are.
But I think that this, as we move forward and we look at purchasing options, there might be some options for joint purchasing with the other districts.
Absolutely. So wrapping through this real quick, again, Block 2, one of our quieter retail blocks, that's the north side of the street right over here. So that's the post office, that's Prismatic Nail, 8 spaces. South side with Bluffington's, with Innovasi, with the bike shop, 12 spaces. And if you add this all together, you're in the neighborhood of about 66, which is actually a little bit less than what we have today, but again, not in the right places, not the right type of racks.
And you'll notice Village Hall is listed on there for bikes, as you were looking for your place to park your bike.
But it's not there, but the public safety is not on
Yeah,
this.
we didn't reach out to public safety with our scope either. Same with the library, same
Yeah,
with
library would be a
PNC.
big,
Certainly those are places we want to
beach,
look at. Haven't
Another
even
one,
Gone that far either.
the perks, yeah.
okay.
So to show you, and this is a good illustration, sort of the last thing we'll have to think about as we go, you would think, oh, we have some racks, we just buy them, we put them in the ground, this should be easy. But there's this whole lovely world of
Bolts.
big dreams and a little sidewalk to work with. Because, if you do this right, if you space these things out the right way and give enough space for people to actually use them, and to use them completely and effectively, you start to run out of space really fast. If I can zoom in here a little more, that would be perfect. So these are some example layouts for what we can do at the train station. Each box represents the space you can park 2 bikes in. So the best practice minimum is 36 inches, 3 feet wide, center to center. You can get away with 28 inches at the minimum. So a little bit, 2 1/3 feet. That's sort of the absolute minimum for what you can really jam in there. And so at the best, we're talking staple, 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 staple. The best we've figured out so far is 26 bikes up here. These are the easy parts. These aren't the hard ones. And then coming down to the other end, actually going down probably a bit in real parking, is sort of 3 staples and 3 staples along the line and kind of getting out over the roof.
I mean, isn't that the area where all the bikes get stolen? I mean, maybe that's just, granted, you're running out of space, but maybe just don't put bikes there. It's too
It's also-
inviting.
Also, might be a good call to make. I'm not too familiar with which sides have had the
On that
theft
end.
happen. I
It's-
wouldn't be
it's-
surprised by you.
Well, for our experience, it's this end, because there's no one really, if no one's at the, no one sees anything.
Yeah, you do have your screening over here and over here. It's not up here on the north side.
Well, I think there's that. I think you have to have whether it's specifically right there, biking as a link to mass transportation has to happen.
Absolutely.
So,
Totally support
I
that.
mean-
It's just
I mean-
trying not to put them in a place where
Sure.
there's not a lot of people and they're hidden.
Right, I know that, besides there, the picture over at the Lake Forest train station where they've got the curved, cover
Awning.
whatever you wanna call it, is an option for us to pick a spot. And obviously that would be more exposed, possibly with cameras.
Just for what it's worth, that awning was put in by the rail line. It was not a city-approved structure.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Doesn't bother me though.
I don't think
like
it's
it,
bad,
actually.
good looking. They could have done some more color with the posts, but, well, the other thing I noticed too in some of the standards, and again, I don't wanna we probably have a whole dedicated meeting to this. I noticed that in some communities, they actually have secure indoor bike, storage. And I'm thinking, that end of the train station there, that was a coffee shop, and I don't know what ever happened with it.
So it was a coffee shop that didn't work out. At one point, there was going to be a valet service, which was sort of a fascinating North Shore story, you come to the train station.
It's Lake
you know,
Bluff.
You gotta multitask your errands, so someone will gladly take your car from the train station, go to Canals for you, get the oil changed, get it
Wow.
detailed, bring it back for you while you're in the comfort of your Chicago Loop office. That didn't quite work out,
But we also have that,
fortunately.
Wow.
we also have that area which is being used for art.
Yeah, so right now there's a lot of leasable space in the train station, not a whole lot of tenants to be had. There's a small space that's being used by artists on the Bluff for storage. There's a small space that's being used for an ATM machine on the south side.
I'm just saying that there are some
There's
places
room.
where they've, in terms of security, bringing it inside and having a key code and paying for storage enhances security in some towns. But
That's interesting.
The locker setup. So before we move off it, just so you're thinking about some of these things as you're walking around the next few weeks. So this is the easy part, and this is certainly an interesting part to think about because over here the issue is scarcity. We have too many bikes, not enough room, really. Even
that's where
the-
mine was stolen, by the way, was on the end, but then I was stupid enough to use a cable lock and not a U-lock.
On the north side?
Yeah, I used a simple cable lock because I thought this is Lake Bluff.
Right.
Do we know on average how many bikes are there during the weekdays?
We've taken a few spot numbers. It looks in the 20 to 30 range. Honestly, part of the problem is, we can take numbers when I'm here or our staff is here, and so we kind of don't get the full day picture. We do have some numbers from Metro that stay out of the, the 570 or so people that are coming in and going off. About 5% of them are reporting they're taking bikes to or from, which actually lines up with these numbers really well, around that 30 to 40 range. Will that grow if there's better parking? If, some people don't have to worry about their bike being stolen as much, or 3 bikes?
Day 2
Could
of
be,
riding his
probably.
bike. It was stolen this year.
Boy. So, but always room to try to find more space to put these. Now, for the more interesting urban design problems, as we go to the east, it doesn't seem like it when you're just walking down the way, but we have what is a very crowded sidewalk to try to navigate here on Block 1, especially down on Block 4. So we have a pretty good amount of sidewalk width here, of course, not pictured here. A lot of the space is eaten up by outdoor dining. A lot of the space is eaten up by car doors. And so where can you try to fit the racks where they're not in the pedestrian clear path, where they're not taking away from dining, where they're not dinging cars or getting dinged by cars? We've tried to take a couple stabs at this. Some of these probably don't, this one probably doesn't work.
I would argue that from a sustainability standpoint, taking up that last parking spot for racks and putting plantings around it and creating a little oasis island for bikes there. I know how tough parking is, but looking at it from a sustainability standpoint, we want more bikes and less cars.
Well, except for during the farmer's market and during the block parties, having bike racks in the middle of the street would be not ideal.
What do you mean in the middle of the street?
Well, in the parking spot, so when they have a block party, there's nothing there except for pedestrians.
But there would be something there. We would create,
Yeah, but I don't know that that's I would be.
well, the problem with the block parties is we then have 300 bikes and they're thrown all over the lawn and
Sure.
you're breaking your neck climbing over them and there's no place to secure them. And that's another issue we talked about in terms of temporary bike rentals or being able to move bikes for these events. But there's been a lot of discussion, and we had that talk by that expert from my firm, where they've actually taken those spots and created a urban park in those spots. So just bringing it up, that you could create barriers around that spot. I'm not saying bollards, it could be bricks, it could be concrete, it could be planters with bike racks inside of it.
Does the information tell us that bikers are willing to park and walk?
Judging by Bluffington's, doesn't look like.
But I mean, would we be able to create a small bike parking lot at the end of, is it
I think you're showing one there
Oak
too.
or Walnut?
Yeah.
Where the post office comes in, that little U parking lot, that little circle parking lot. Could we create a more expansive bike parking lot there?
I don't know if this map goes quite that far.
Or if you just want to bring up Google Maps.
Yeah.
And have signage throughout the village saying bike
Parking.
parking.
I
Yeah,
feel
but they probably wouldn't.
yeah,
I
that
don't-
might risk
yeah.
people just leaving their bikes on the side of buildings and not parking them at all.
You don't think they'd go to the bike parking?
What about that space that's the last car on the bottom right? That space? Or
That would probably
even,
work.
or
this
even
gore.
that whole area.
There's your scientific engineering term for the day, gore, actual term.
Yeah, I think if we put them in the back and away from the businesses where they're gonna go in and have a beer or dinner, I think they're gonna not use them as much as if we put them out front. Same reason with people wanna park right out front instead of parking at the train station, which is open in the evenings. People just don't use it that often. They wanna park right there.
And to the extent that, I mean, the upside of this is there is some longer term parking here, but this stuff over here is about as far away. It's gotten more people going in and out, so a little bit more secure, although a little bit less secure for eyes. Double-edged sword, but, this kind of breathes during the day. By the time nighttime has come, the commuters have taken their bikes out of here. By the time you're talking about the restaurants starting to climb up their activity scale, someone could just as easily park here and make that walk if they were inclined to.
Or you could create it in the green space with the covering in that, along the bike path, like right there, yeah.
I mean, that would be another option too, is, again, that plays against some of our other interests as well. Talking about getting rid of green space, getting rid of adding impervious surface, but certainly you could do a shelter type arrangement somewhere around here. On the south side of the green, you do have a couple good spots here where you could add a pad sort of out of the line of sight of the expanse of the green and probably add a
Yeah.
good chunk of parking there.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
could be a good spot
That
too,
seems
because
like
you're
a
just
really good-
walking right across the street to get over there.
Yeah.
And
Plus, it's
walking.
event and
Town.
farmer's market. Well, take up a spot, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
That seems like the best spot. Like a really good one.
Okay.
A couple unorthodox ideas. So I think we usually use this for snow storage. This might be a problem to do in practice, but again, another gore. So this is used to sort of shuffle traffic into making sure they're properly in the lane and they're not trying to creep in a place where drivers down Sheridan can't see them. But because you already have this blocked off space that isn't a regulation parking space, you can probably, is it close enough to the brewery? Who knows? But you can probably jam 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 bikes there, which is a lot. I mean, that's more than the metro station, sort of, or not more, but as much as
Would
one
it be better
side.
to be on the parking side, on the Village Green side?
Well, the upside is, I mean, you don't have to cross the street here. You've got I mean, it's free
Yeah, but-
room, it's not used for anything.
It's not a bad spot. Again, you'd have to barrier it off to provide some safety, but
Yeah,
you're not losing a parking spot, and it's really centrally located as well. Although in the green space, it just means we just have to put some hardscape there, but,
yeah.
okay.
And then the Village Green, we didn't really look at spaces where you might or might not do it. There's aesthetic issues there you'd want to think about, certainly. This seems like a good spot. You would think you'd probably want something in this vicinity, but then you're talking about the iconic view shed.
Yeah, well, yeah, you'd be taking up space in front of the, sorry, in
Very
front of
good.
the monument.
Yeah, which may not be kosher. So going east, we put in the parking demand for Village Hall, but didn't really get there yet. North side of the street, this is actually pretty easy. A lot of sidewalk, not a lot of outdoor users that are encroaching into it, so you can probably park this side fairly well. We've got 2 here in front of the post office, bearing in mind some of that can carry over here easily. And then 1 every, 50 feet, 100 feet or so. The south side, I don't even know where to start. It's the most constrained by far. I mean, Innovasi as it is, has trouble accommodating their dining and leaving the 4-foot clear space we need just as the absolute minimum.
Well, I think if you've got a lot of space on that other side, like you said, it's just a matter of crossing over the street to Innovasi.
Yeah.
You can see your bike while you're sitting outside, so it creates that connection, you're not hidden.
Yeah.
Then that's that dirt area, the mud pit.
Yeah. And can you try to make,
Put some pavers, some permeable pavers and,
is there a visibility issue here? Is it, it's just
well, it's
too far?
already there. We're also getting the connectivity to the library as well. But the sandwich shop, I think if someone might want to be close to Bluffington's, there's an option you don't have to have that many, but you could have a few. I also don't know, like, if the bike shop would like to put 1 or 2 out there. I mean, you've already got you had pictures out there of people putting their bikes there anyway.
On the planters.
Yeah,
Planters.
on the posts,
Well,
on the light posts.
that silver one we showed you, let me pull up the right one. No need to look at my shiny shoes. Polish them about once a year. This is in front of the bike shop. Now, of course, is there anyone in the bike shop right now? At this
Yeah.
time, it's about 2 in the afternoon.
But with
probably not.
those different types, you have an option to line them up linearly rather than this way.
Yep.
So there's that strip there without taking up too much space, has the ability to line them up there. And I think also too, again, if you've got the decorative, it's colorful, it's got a logo, the village logo, I think it really makes it the downtown help pop. It's a beautification thing, so.
The bike shop uses that space for displaying their merchandise. So I don't know how many people really feel that they can put their bikes there.
And on the nights when Prairie is open for wine and food, a lot of people actually put their bikes there as well. So
Yeah.
having one across from Prairie is.
And certainly, in an ideal world, no matter what, you'd probably, this is probably the line you're talking about doing something in, and of course, you do it parallel to the sidewalk, try to keep this as open as you can. Right now, if people
Yeah.
are parking here, they're encroaching 6 feet
Do
long.
they move those for the Fourth of July parade?
I don't recall, I believe so.
Well,
I don't think so.
Again, they're gonna take up a lot less space. If you think about typical towns would have parking meters, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so.
did you have something specific? Sir, gentleman, young man? Did you have something that you were here for? Was this it?
Yes, I was.
Come on up.
Come on,
You can speak to us.
I'm just here to get something signed up for the Boy Scouts. I had to attend the city council meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
sweet.
all right.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Performance merit badges, yes, reserved city government meetings.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You guys a favor, won't you just sign off on this?
Yeah. Where do I sign? Just anywhere.
Pay to the order of.
There's nothing in that account to take, don't worry.
Okay, village, put your village role, otherwise anybody could fake that.
I was starting with this.
How late do you guys have to stay tonight?
This is one of our longer ones.
Yeah.
Meetings tonight.
We're almost done, I think.
It's 8:50 and I will have dinner, so.
Should probably
Oh,
get
I'll
extra
say you
credit
do.
for this one.
It's a little bit more than you like it.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyways, I just wanted to be sure. Okay. Starving.
So, we'll work to continue to bring this back to you at the next meeting, probably expand this out. Go east to the library maybe, go south into the public safety building, into the village hall, get a little bit more information. But as you're going around your day-to-day lives, please keep your eyes open, be thinking with bicycle glasses, I guess you would say, and
What's the cost for those, like ballpark type?
It really depends. So a bog standard staple rack, probably in the 80 to 120 range unfinished, a little more with paint. When we get into
piece.
cutting each, yeah. When you get into bulk, that could be cheaper. When you get into, putting designs in, things like that, that can be more. But of course, these things have a relatively long lifespan. They cost
So if we
pretty
ordered a
well.
bunch of them with a village logo, maybe $250 a pop, if that?
That's probably a fair enough number, yeah. Part of the joy is.
And it doesn't have to-
I would be more inclined to see the village logo versus, or even if it's not the boy and the bike and the dog, just initials or something versus having Donati's. I'm
It's
not
just an
singling
idea.
them out. I understand you could get them to pay for it, but I don't, what happens if that business doesn't exist? Now you have a bike that needs to be, maybe there's a way to do it on top or,
Removable
with the
plaque.
bolts,
Yeah.
when you have to turn it upside down.
It was just an idea to offset the
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, sure.
And, obviously, I would think that, given the, being respectful of the village budgets, we probably wouldn't, put in 250 of them right away all over town. We'd probably pick some areas, see how they're responded to and used and go from there, so.
And if you got the
Especially-
ones where you had to get several, you could always have one on each end
Bingo.
of the logo and then just the regular ones in between.
Correct, yeah.
Good idea.
Could box them out.
And cap them.
And cap them, right.
Cool.
The only thing I would add as we look into this more, we talked a little bit about, we have fantastic biking, I would call them town-to-town paths here, the large paths. But I think that within the village itself, we're not real good on getting bikes from, say, the train station to the beach or the train station to other parts of town safely. Sidewalks are for people. We've already got signs up that once you turn past the train station, get off your bike and walk it. I think at some point, we might want to look in this master plan, and we may have to hire someone, but we might want to look at whether we want some dedicated paths in town.
Agreed, because if you're trying to get from the bike to the, from the train station to the beach, and you've got angled parking, and you're riding down the road.
Right.
It's a nightmare.
So I think it might be one or two roads that, all the cities are doing this, Chicago's doing it, whether we look at stripes, whether we look at, some sort of little plastic barriers along the way, there might be an ultimate plan where we try and, because like I said, we have that, you can go all the way to Libertyville, you can go to Kenosha, but just getting around town is a hazard.
And I will say, we can bring it to you at a future date. The Plan Commission does have some sort of high-level thoughts about this. They do have a few corridors picked out. Leslie, you helped write some of that. You're familiar with it.
Right.
So some of the big, broad strokes are there as far as,
Good, great.
paths in the West Terrace, things like that. Certainly, I don't think their plan calls for any advisory bike lanes or anything like that.
The only one we talked about would be from the village center to the lake. If there would be some kind of a lane in that area, but that was it. Other than that, no.
So, but we can keep working on that one too.
All right,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, just a few last reports, I suppose, and then we'll get you on out of here. We need to talk about dates. I'll save that for the end.
Okay.
Solar panel zoning ordinance, just like it says, the village board had a favorable first reading of this Monday night. So right now, the village has some fairly, let's say, heavy solar restrictions, actually a bit heavier than the rest of the North Shore. So today, if you want to build some solar panels, as Miss Marietta Hance is experiencing herself, part of the inspiration for this, you're looking at about 8 to 12 weeks of waiting and some money along the way. You have to go to our plan commission, you have to go to our architectural board of review, you have to go to the village board, you have to go to the village board again, and it's probably not the right approach to be taking with these. So the changes proposed by the plan commission would allow these to just happen as of right. There's a few guardrails, safety valves, what have you, there in case someone were to propose something crazy, but generally speaking, you can just come get a building permit and do it. And that's the way a lot of communities are starting to go. I know Lake County is getting ready to re-examine this issue again, as well as some potential power procurement by government agencies. So just wanted you to be aware of that.
The only recommendation I'd have, and I brought this up previously, and I know Drew kind of frowned when I said it, as far as individuals putting in energy sustainable features into their house, and that includes should anyone ever want to do or a business want to do a LEED building, I would like to see a reduction, or in some cases even elimination of building permit fees.
Incentivize.
Yes, so if you're gonna put in a solar panel, you shouldn't have to pay another $300 to the village to put it in.
And I
Excellent
think we
idea.
have that in the plan. I'm gonna scroll up.
We
I
should be
think we
doing-
have those very
yeah.
words in there.
Yeah, I mean, we should do everything we can to encourage it, not to, create barriers.
Right. And I you know,
Sure.
because I know building permit fees came up a lot when I was on the board. I wouldn't say we have the highest, but we have notable permit fees, particularly for large commercial developments, and I would think that there could be some sort of, again, this was on our long-term plan, but should someone be willing to do certain significant LEED or certification or projects, that it would be just a reduction in costs.
So right now, are any incentives in place for green building?
No.
Oh, that's shameful.
Shameful.
Good thing there's a committee.
Welcome to
Good
the
thing
group.
there's a committee.
Well, it looked like reading the ordinance that, as of right, using the ordinance, everything that we would ever come up with on the zoning board, as far as questions to the petitioner, is already covered in the restrictions within the ordinance, so it looked like it was perfect.
Great.
When I was reading it, it was exactly what we would ask for on the zoning board as a special permit, so.
I think that's the first time I've been told I've done anything perfect for zoning law.
We're
man.
perfect.
Let the minutes reflect.
I gotta hold on to something.
Momentary lapse, sorry. I'll think of
No, it's all
something.
right.
Let me think of something.
Okay. I guess we'll end with the meeting notes. Is there any member reports that anyone wants to report on? I will mention that I've talked to my neighbor across the street, is one of the ones that has the chickens. She has 3. She got her first egg last week.
Yay.
Nice.
Said it was the most delicious egg they've ever had. They've had no issues. They've had no predators. They've had no illnesses, nothing of any Note. She says they eat a lot of bugs out of the lawn. They're partial to cicadas.
17 years
O'Neill.
from now, we're going to have a rush on chickens.
But no, and no noise, no concerns at this point that I've heard.
Can you smell them?
No.
What will they do with them during the winter?
They have a housing unit that's insulated.
So they're going to keep theirs in the winter, even though they won't lay in the winter. They'll just-
No, they lay in they
Mo-
lay in the winter.
Most of them stop laying in the winter.
My business partner has them. He has a light, and he has eggs all winter
So he heats his,
with not a heat light, just a yellow, or just a regular light.
Yeah, I think we only have one permitting person who's not keeping them over the winter.
Yes. That's okay, they're using them.
Yes, they are. Local food.
Local food.
How many people ended up participating? 3?
So we've given 3 approvals, there's only 1 established right now. So one, I believe, will not proceed, and then the other one, I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
But I did get the question, how many more are available? So the word is, it'll get out.
For the trial, is there a restriction on how many? Is it, is it 5?
And there have been no participants with the bees yet?
No buzz on the bluff.
It's unfortunate because we did have someone who really wanted to do it. The timing just didn't, we weren't ready for it.
Yep,
So,
maybe next year.
Yep.
Okay, next meeting?
That is the question.
So, other than Leslie, are people around on the 3rd?
How frequently does the committee meet?
Once a-
Monthly?
monthly.
Okay,
It's usually the last Wednesday.
right, that's what I'm gonna say.
Last Wednesday, but we were trying to time it with this second meeting of the planner, right?
Yep.
Does that mean the next meeting, September 26th?
Yes, but that's what's under question.
Okay.
Could it be October 3rd?
Pushing it just a little bit.
Well, how much,
Because
how
they're
much,
not available? Is that?
That was a date that worked for them. I know John and I are out of town for it. It sounds like
3rd
we've
or
got
the
the date.
26th?
The 26th.
Yeah.
It sounded like that was the date that we could get everybody back together again,
October
you're-
3rd,
October 3rd. Just a week off.
yeah.
I
I'm
don't.
planning to be here at this point.
I don't have any conflicts.
You have to know.
Okay, for now.
and the next one would be Halloween.
Which I think we struck off the list at the start of the year.
But is the third going to be pretty much exclusively that presentation, right?
Whatever you like.
Well, I think we need to circle back to the bikes, and we need to circle back, eventually start planning the dark sky presentation. So I'm just trying to think ahead, to keep us moving. I think if we crowd too much into a meeting, I just worry about us being able to talk about it more. So if we did the 3rd, we could do the
We do the 3rd and the 24th.
24th. And get back to some of the other agenda items. I'd be open to that too. And then we got November and December too.
Well, November and December will both be a bit odd, so December.
Yeah,
would
I
be
mean, it
surprised
actually, would it work just to shift it so that it's November 7th instead of,
The 24th?
right, and then December 5th instead of the 28th? I don't know.
Or we could move them
Start
to
to
this,
hit
or
all
we
those
could,
holiday times.
yeah. I see what you mean. Even the 14th would be closing in on November 14th. Would be closing in on the holiday, but not too bad.
14th, I think, actually the 14th
Can we
would be a no-go. We'd have a conflict on that day.
Can we circulate a couple of dates?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
have
we
us all
can.
get back to you?
We can make that happen. I mean, the big thing is just as long as the first October date works, we can work through the rest.
Yep.
Just need to make sure that's firm before we start
Jiggering.
turning the wheels there.
Okay.
Okay?
Good, so we done?
Motion to adjourn.
Someone needs to say
Oh,
second.
so
A few
moved.
people
Oh,
need to
second.
say
She moved it? Okay, second.
All in favor?
Aye.